Welcome to my course, the Complete HTML course. My name is Simon and I hope you join me on this journey of weekly lessons that will be available every Tuesday, unless you're watching this further down the line, and then the videos should be all available to watch at your leisure. Please watch, subscribe, hit the notification button to see future videos and get notified when they're available. But this is the HTML course which I've created to help you start your web development journey. Now, before we get too started, let's have a brief outline. So, how do you create web pages? Well, web pages in the industry are split into two areas. If you're looking for a certain job, you'll be looking at front-end development or back-end development. If you cover both areas, you'll be classed as a full-stack developer, but these are quite rare these days, unless you're just doing it as a hobby and just keeping small web pages. But big companies, you'll be specified and be learning in one area, because there's that much to learn. A full-stack developer would be quite busy, although you'd be quite busy just being in one of these areas. So front-end development concentrates on what the user sees in the web pages: layouts, drop-down menus, navigation, images, etc. And there's also styling, interaction. So that is basically what the front-end development does. You move more on to back-end development, focused on the server side of websites, databases, web applications are just two examples of what I run on the server side. For example, if you want to create a shop and you want to use a database, and you also want to have a secure login, then you'd be coding a lot more of that web page on the back-end development. Although what you see on the screen will be mostly coded on the front end, but stuff that you do not want people to see, because it's on front-end development, you can see code within the browser when you choose the right option. So you don't want to see how people have set up their and how to get onto their websites using the sign-ins. So that's all done on the back end, and you can't see the code that's created for that. So that's just one example. On front-end development, you'll be using HTML, which is basically the content of your web page. CSS is used for the styling, so if you want to have it look fancy, you'll be using CSS, font sizes, colours, background colours, size of images, etc. You're doing CSS. And then if you want to add some interaction with your web page, where if somebody clicks something and it does something else on your web page, then you use JavaScript, which is a very powerful language. But all these three together, you can create some good websites on front-end development. And if you're just becoming a front-end developer, these are the first three main areas that you will concentrate on. And my courses will extend on to cover all these three areas, as they are the proper coding machines for creating front-end web pages. If you decide to go into back-end development, you will then be able to go on to things like PHP, Java, Python, SQL. For some examples, there are others. And then available on front-end and back-end are some frameworks and libraries. But if you're interested in these, then please just Google them to find out exactly what these have to offer. So that's a brief look into how web development is set up. But for this course, you don't need to know much, but this you'll be covering this HTML to get you started, to give you a bit of a taster. And this is a great course to get started before you move on to CSS and then JavaScript. So let's move on and get straight into it. What is HTML? HTML is the standard markup language for creating web pages. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. HTML contains the structure and content of a web page and shows the browser how to display the content. HTML contains a series of elements. So this is a good example. Say what you're looking at the moment is our web page. Then things like the text, what is HTML, the logo, then all this text which says what HTML is actually put into HTML. Now, you wouldn't have it looking like this with just HTML. You'd have to move on to CSS. And CSS allows you to put bigger fonts, make things bolder, shrink images, make them display a certain position on the screen, as well as all the text, the styling, the background colour. And how this information is displayed on the screen is created in CSS. Now, one important thing here is this statement here. HTML contains a series of elements. Now, elements are the first thing to get your head around. A HTML web page is a list of elements which the browser executes starting at the top of the document and then moves down the list, carrying out the instructions of each element as it moves down the document. Depending on what element you use depends on what task the browser will action. An element has a start tag and then some content and then some closing tag. Now, before we move on, there are some elements that don't contain a closing tag, but that will be explained a bit later. But the syntax of a basic tag element will have the less than sign, the tag name, and then the greater than sign. And then the content of that tag will go in between. And then the end is declared with a closing tag. And it's exactly the same as the opening tag, but there is this forward slash, which tells the browser that this is actually the closing tag of that element. So the whole of this is a tag element. Now, one tag element available in HTML is a H1 element. H1 is the biggest header you can have. So, for example, if this was a web page, this element information here, the title, would be displayed in a H1 tag. So, let's say, for instance, I wanted to call this my first HTML web page. So, we'd have the H1 opening tag, the my first HTML web page, which is the content, but what we want to call the header is exactly written here, and then we'd use a H1 closing tag to say this is the end of the element. So the H1 tag, or the browser, will take the H1 tag and say, okay, you want to call this your header. Take the header name, which will use my first HTML web page, and display that as your main header across the top. Now, that is a basic piece of code, and that's actually a code element within HTML. And you will create something similar to this shortly. But the thing to get your head around, that you're just creating in HTML a list of these tag elements. And you just create 1, 2, 3, you just create a massive list. And that's how you display information on the screen. So what do we need to get started using HTML? A text editor. These come in all shapes and sizes. Now, there are a lot of differences. Now, at Notepad, you can create code, it's a basic text editor. But with Notepad, it doesn't tell you when you've made an error in your code. That's for you to figure out. It just won't run properly when you try to, well, it will let you create a browser, but things won't be displayed properly. But things like Visual Studio Code, brackets, which I've used before, they help you as you're going along typing your text in the editor. And when you mistype something, it will tell you. Or if you're creating an element that doesn't exist, it will tell you. And if you missed a part of the tag off, whether it's a less than sign, greater than symbol, again, it will notify you that you're making a mistake. So these are much better to start with as beginners because they help you create text or content within your web page that works. So I advise that you stick to one that will help you. And for this course, I advise the Microsoft Visual Studio because it's one I'm using. It'll be easier for you to follow what I'm doing. And it's free to download, so it's a no-win situation really. So you also need a web browser. Safari, Firefox, Google Chrome, Opera and Microsoft Edge. There are more. But I use Google Chrome because it's the most used as of this video. So most of you will be using Google Chrome as well. So I advise you to use Google Chrome along with Visual Studio Code to help following this. But if you want to use any others, that's absolutely fine. And hopefully you will still be able to follow this course. It's exactly the same code, but you will be using a different editor with different options. So when I do a save or I use a live server, you probably won't be able to follow it like you would in the others. So it's all free. So I advise you to use the ones I'm using, which is Google Chrome and Visual Studio Code. So I've set this up. So I've got my Visual Studio on the left and I've got my web browser open on the right. Now with the HTML code you have to start off by selecting a folder. So open a folder. I've just opened a folder on my web browser, sorry not my web browser, on my desktop called test. Created a folder and then I've opened that folder. So I'm going to open that folder now, and I've also got the Explorer open. There's nothing in that folder. So I'm going to create my first folder, and within HTML you always call your default page or home page index.html, and then when you put this on the server finds your index.html page and knows that's your home page. So I'm going to call it index.html, and then it will open up the document. I'll just shrink the browser back down so we can see half the screen. Now you can open up the browser and type the destination path of your file, or if you're using Visual Studio Code, there's an extensions add-ons here, and one of the things I've got installed is this live server, and what this does, it helps me run my document. I'll just shut that down and shut that down. So let's start creating some HTML. So remember we said previously it's a list of elements. Now the first thing you need to have at the top of your HTML document is called the dot type, and it's a less than sign, a symbol and a doc type, which if I spell it right, so dot type, and then we just need to declare that we are using HTML. Now this isn't actually a HTML tag. All this does is tells the browser that you're creating a HTML5 document, and that simply is the decoration there which the browser uses. Everything else from now on are actual HTML tag elements, and the very first element you need is the HTML element. So it's the less than sign, the tag is called HTML, and then the less than sign, and as you can see HTML automatically creates the closing tag, or I should say the editor creates the closing tag. Not all the editors will do that, you'll have to type it yourself, but certain ones will definitely create the closing tag. It tries to predict what you're going to do. It doesn't always be helpful because you have to end up deleting some stuff as you find it later, but basically the editors create stuff for you, but you'd have to type it if it doesn't. So you've got the opening HTML tag and the closing HTML tag. There can only be one HTML element per document. Okay, so I can't create more than one of these, and you can't create more than one doc type. Now all your HTML code goes in this HTML element. Okay, so the first thing you need to create inside your HTML element is the head tag. So again, that creates a closing tag for me. So you've got an opening and closing tag, and there's no content inside at the moment, so it's empty. Because I just want to create the next one, which is the body tag. Now the head element contains all your data about data, meta tags, titles, information about your web page, but doesn't get displayed on the screen of the browser. Okay? Anything that you put into the body element is information that you want to display onto the browser. Okay? More will come straightforward as we follow, but that's basically what them two do. So let's create our first thing. So I'm just going to open up both of these elements just to give us a bit more space. So as you can see, the HTML element is the first element, and then you can create elements inside elements. So inside that element is a head element, and that's the first one, and the next element is the body element. They're at the same level. So now we're going to create an element inside the head element. And as you can see, we are just using elements, or tag elements. So the one we're going to use now is called the title element. And we're going to get content, and we're going to say my first web page. Okay. Now what the title tag does, that's the heading of your document. Now what the browser does with that, so if I run the live server, which I've been trying to, so when I run this program, you can see that there's nothing inside the browser, and that's because we've got nothing inside the body of our code. But what we do have is my first web page in the tab of the browser, and that is because we created this title tag, and the browser will take the name or the content of the element and use that as the tab header in the browser because you've used the title tag. Okay, again, we only have one title per page, and this is something you have to have. Now there are some other things you have to have, and we're going to create them now. And we'll start at the top. Now we have to declare the character set. Now there are more than one character sets out there, but the most used, which covers most symbols, characters in the world, is called the UTF-8 character set. So we will use that one because it's the most used today. So basically this goes at the top of your head section, and we're going to use the meta tag, which we should use this on more than one thing, but to use the character set you have to use the meta tag element. And what we're going to do, you open it with the meta tag. Now we are going to put an attribute in here. We shall cover attributes more in the line, but you're just setting something here. So we're declaring a character set, and we're saying that it is UTF-8, which is the one we want to use. Then you close the opening tag. Now the meta tag doesn't have a closing tag like the head element, the HTML body, title tag, because if it doesn't have any content, it's only got attribute settings, so it doesn't need a closing tag. So you just do an opening tag with an attribute, and then you can close that opening tag off, and that's all it needs. It doesn't need a closing tag. There are more tags you'll come across that don't need a closing tag because they don't get no content, but we should understand that a bit further down as we come across them. But for now, just remember that content is anything between the opening and closing tag. So if it has content, it will have a closing tag. So that's the character set, and this is just a default thing you should do anyway, so you don't need to know. You can Google it and know more about it, but it's not really something you need to delve too much into at this stage. And then the other one is to do with resolution. Depending on what device you're on, obviously you need things you create your web page into scale to the right size. So there's a default thing we put in, and then when you learn more about scaling, I think you can change this default. But a default thing to start with, just to help with scaling of your web page on different devices, because they're all different screen sizes. You put this default screen. You use this default screen setting. So we're opening another tag element, and again we're using the meta tag, but this time we need to set the viewport. So name equals viewport, and then content equals, and then what we do, the width equals the device minus the width, and then we need initial scale. And then we close that tag off. So that's just default setting for the viewport on the device that people are viewing your web page on. So that is something you need to put in as well. Now, there's only one other thing you need as a default when starting to code. And in the HTML tag, we're going to add another attribute like we did in his meta tags. And there's an attribute called language, which is obviously short for language. And we're going to equals, and then some exclamation marks, we're going to place the letters E in, which the browser notifies that we are using English within our content of a web page in HTML. So it's like my first web page is written in English, the document will be written in English. So that's just something for the browser and the Google searches and other search engines to recognise that this is actually an English web page. So if we save that now, so again, nothing in the body of the browser because we've got nothing in the body of our code. The meta tags are just settings. There's nothing displayed on the screen anywhere. It's all happening behind the scenes of the browser. And the only thing that we can see on the screen is my first web page. And that's because we set the title of our document to my first web page. And the browser uses that as your title and puts it in the tab of the browser. And then obviously we created a language that we put there. So I hope you can see the structure of elements. So you just list in elements, and you can have elements in elements in elements. So, and then you just create a list of elements as you go down. So that is the basic structure of an HTML page. Now this is what you need as default when creating a web page. So every time you go to create a new web page, start by typing this out. You'll get to a point where you either copy and paste it from a default document, or you type it quite quick. So it won't take long to get to this stage. But I'm going to end this video now, this lesson, because this is a good place to stop. Because you've got the basics of an HTML document there. It doesn't do a lot, but it's a good start. And then the next lesson, we'll start adding stuff to the body and seeing things displayed in the browser. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If I could ask a favour to help support this new channel, that you hit that subscribe button and then select all on the bell for future videos that are coming out. And then I'd appreciate if you also hit the like button. This will help the channel grow, and then I shall carry on doing videos as I know they're being watched and appreciated. And then can you also check out the website that I'm just briefly going to show you. So this is the website that I've created to help with this course. You obviously see it's BF Creations. I haven't completely finished this website yet, so there's no login or join at the moment, but this is the first course I've created, which is HTML5. And if you scroll down a bit, you'll see future videos coming up and courses that are starting and what's available at the moment. But you'll see that there are some download sheets. And simply for each one, you just click on the download and it will appear up in the corner and it will download to your PC or laptop or whatever you're using. These are just some PDF documents I've created to go with this course. You've got the category tag sheet that we cover. That's also the tag sheet in alphabetical order, and you've got the tag sheet, attribute sheet to go with the tags, and then the last one is the HTML course file. So at the end of each lesson, the HTML code that we've used is available at the end of each course and lesson we've done. Click the download one, that will download all the different lessons we've covered and the actual on-screen code that I've used to help you follow that. So I hope these are helpful. Leave comments in the videos as well so I can make improvements. Tell me what you think. Hope it's all been easy to follow and I appreciate it. Thanks for watching this video and I shall see you in the next one. On this course they are released every Tuesday evening, so hopefully you'll follow along and clicking that bell will help get notifications of that. So thank you very much and thank you for watching.